Please welcome to the TEDxSonoma County stage, George Dom.
Wow, we've heard so much great comments today. How to do more, how to be more, how to care more, how to make a bigger difference. I believe in order to do all of that, we need to trust more. I mean, if you look around the world today, literally every institution of modern life, I've never seen such low levels of trust. We're in a crisis. Now, I'd like you to think about, what if your success depended upon your teammates coming to work every day and putting their lives in your hands? And I don't mean that figuratively, I mean it literally, that they come to work 6 days a week for 2 years and every day depend on you for their life. Well, for 2 years I had the rare privilege and honor of being the commanding officer and flight leader of the Blue Angels. My daughters are up in the back row in the balcony, and this is what they refer to as my Buzz Lightyear picture. Flying in the #1 jet, though, I never forgot the tragedy that befell our Air Force brethren, the Thunderbirds, when on January 18th, 1982, they were doing a formation loop in training, and the leader didn't pull out. And they put 4 supersonic jets, symmetrically spaced, into the desert floor, killing all 4 pilots. And that sounds crazy, but when you're flying just a couple feet apart, at 300, 400, 500 miles an hour, at very low altitude, doing 3-dimensional aerobatics. Believe me, the wingmen aren't looking around enjoying the scenery. They are looking at the leader in order to make sure that they stay in position. Here we are in San Francisco.
Right in center point.
Now, there's no fancy computers doing this. This is all old-fashioned eye-hand coordination. Steely concentration for 40 minutes. Now, we didn't start out that way. We didn't start out that close, of course. You know, we started out in preseason training, 2 by 2 by 2, relatively high and far apart. And as we built trust and confidence, we gradually brought the formations together, 4 jets, then 6 jets, getting closer and lower to the ground. And that trust and confidence is built over time, and what I came to understand is that my teammates every day were asking 5 simple questions about me. And based on the answers they got, they would make a decision to what degree they were going to trust me. Are they going to fly here, or are they going to fly here? And I believe those are the same 5 questions that your team is asking about you, based on the axiom that in order to be trusted, you must be trustworthy. The first question is, do you walk your talk? Do you keep your commitments? Do you live up to your promises? Do you live the shared values? The second question was, because they knew without a doubt that I was going to be there when the sun was shining and the air was smooth and everything was going great, but they knew that there were going to be challenges coming during the season. And what they wondered was I going to be with them whenever times are tough, whenever we have to take a punch? And not only that, but just showing up, they want to know, am I going to show up playing my A game, leading them to victory? That's what they wanted to know. And early in the season, we were doing an air show in El Paso, Texas. And the wind was blowing that day, 25 knots, gusting 30 to 35, blowing over a ridgeline west of the airport, putting tremendous turbulence in the air overhead the airport. And as we marched down and climbed in the jets and taxied out in formation and took the runway, I frankly wasn't sure how this was going to go, because I had never flown a Blue Angel air show in that type of turbulence. We lit the afterburners, turned on the smoke, rolled down the runway, accelerated, the formation lifted off. We accelerated to 300 knots, and I pulled back and took us into the vertical for our looping maneuver on takeoff. And my fears were realized. I mean, we were getting thumped by this turbulence. Bang, bang, bang. And I'm just hunkered down in my cockpit in the #1 jet, trying to fly the most solid airplane I can for my wingman. And after a while, we're getting thrown around, and I'm wondering, how are we not hitting? And then I glance in my rear view mirrors, and behind me, all I see is blue and gold metal. These guys are welded in, Blue Angel close, flying a solid, safe air show for 40 minutes. And after we landed, we were a different team. We taxied back off the runway in formation, pulled into the line, shut down the motors, canopies come up. I'm drenched in sweat. We're all mentally and physically exhausted. We climb out of the jets, form up, and march down, and then end the show by a sharp salute to the crowd. And then shake each other's hands, smile in relief, and then the #2 pilot, Major Pat Cook, looks over at me and says, "Way to go, boss." And in fighter pilot vernacular, that is a high praise, let me tell you. Wow. So we were a different team. Different team that day, because that day they learned that on the toughest days, I was going to be there flying my best jet. And I learned that on the toughest days, they were going to be there with me all the way. And we took our performance to a new level. Throughout the season, we continued to refine and improve and get a little closer and a little lower and the show a little tighter as we continue to try to meet the standards of excellence and perfection of the Blue Angels, pushing human performance every single day. And every day these guys would come to work. And I realized very quickly that as the leader, I could have a good day and the team might have an average day. But the team would never have a great day if I, as a leader, didn't have a great day. And so as we'd sit down at the table for our pre-flight brief, I could see question #3 in their eyes. And that was, are you good enough to lead us today? Are you better than you were yesterday, but not as good as you're going to be tomorrow? And it took constant improvement all the time, always pushing myself to get out into my discomfort zone, always willing to accept positive, constructive feedback every day in order to get better and better and better. I could never let up in trying to improve if I was going to sustain the trust of my wingmen. By July, we hit mid-season form, and let me tell you, now we're not climbing in the jets, we're strapping them on, and we're going out there, and I got to the point where I could literally change the trajectory of a maneuver based on the inflection of my voice on the radios. If I needed to speed the roll in order to keep us underneath some clouds, or pull a little harder at the bottom of a loop to stay above a ridgeline, or turn the formation sharper to navigate around a building, these guys were there with me all the way because they knew that I understood what I was asking them to do. And so they would be with me all the way through. This notion of connection applied just as much to our wonderful maintenance team on the ground as well. Notice the question is, do they believe you understand them? Now that's a different question than me asking myself, do I believe I understand them? Because what I think is interesting, but frankly not sufficient. What matters is, what do they believe? And when they believe that I get them, that I understand their hopes and their concerns and their best ideas and what their roles are and what their challenges are, they're going to be right there with me all the way. Now, throughout the season, from beginning of training till the very end, it was all based on clear, concise, and direct communication. Because at 500 miles an hour, we just don't have time to deal with misunderstandings. And so every debrief, we would focus on how can we communicate better? How can we generate greater candor in order to perform better? Now, here's the big takeaway. What we had to learn to do in order to be successful in the air worked just as well on the ground, as well as in our personal lives, in our homes and our families, and out in the community. This idea of building trust and improving relationships, right? And this is not something that you can just set and forget. It's a constant work in progress all the time. I'll tell you about our two solo pilots, number 5 and number 6. I called them the odd couple. Number 5, Lieutenant Commander Scott Baer, call sign Yogi. He was the obsessive-compulsive Felix Unger from the television show and the movies. And the number 6 pilot, Lieutenant Doug V8 Verissimo, he was the happy-go-lucky Oscar Madison. And at one point early in the season, they started focusing more on their personal differences than on their common mission. And we had to sit them down and have a little bit of an intervention and help them regain mutual understanding and perspective so that they could restore the trust. And while they never became personal friends and buddies, they did show us that they were certainly able to become professional teammates. Now, you may be surprised to know that we would never say, none of us would say that we were the best pilots in the Navy and Marine Corps, because there were extraordinary aviators out there flying off aircraft carriers and expeditionary airfields around the world day and night. But we would say with absolute conviction that we were the best team of pilots in the world. And the Blue Angels and their extraordinary support personnel and maintenance team, they continue to achieve things that far beyond what any of us would have thought was possible individually, right? And it's because they are a common group of people with an uncommon devotion to a core value of high trust. And so I ask you, imagine what more we could get accomplished if leaders and teams everywhere asked themselves these 5 questions every single day. Thank you.